Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the podcast. I'm your host Brian Keane, online fitness coach, nutritionist, and 4-time best-selling author, here to help you normally by deconstructing expert guests on all things health, fitness, and mindset. But today's episode is a slightly different format. It is a solo recap episode of my recent ayahuasca retreat with Sacruna in Marbella and Malaga in Spain. If you're watching this on YouTube, Brian Keane Fitness, I'm also recording it from my car. There's work being done in my house at the minute. I'm putting in new bathrooms and the place is like a bombshell hit it. So I'm recording this episode in my car. So the sound, hopefully it'll be good. I've got my microphone in front of me. But if you are watching on YouTube, that is the background you see in case you're curious. This episode is going to be a recap. So I'm going to blend it in a slightly different format to normal with the recent experience of the retreat, how it all came about, plant medicine in general, my experience with it. And then I'm going to use the questions that have been sent in. I've got more than 10 here. I've amalgamated and blended some of them because they were similar. And I'm going to run through the Ayahuasca Sacruna Retreat. This is actually the first time that I've linked up with the retreat. So I have a code for anyone that wants to use it. It's Keen 2025. It'll give you 5% off if you decide to go on this trip, on this experience, on this retreat. But with plant medicine, similar to previous episodes I've recovered, this is not for everybody. I think with something as powerful and life-changing and transformative as ayahuasca in particular, it is something that if you feel a call for it and it's been in your space for a while, it could be exactly what you need to go to the next level in your life or work through some of the onions or layers of trauma or just stories that are holding you back. But as with all plant medicines, you need to be very, very careful and mindful. If you have any history of mental health issues or mental illness, it's in your family, you've had a psychotic break in the past, you need to be very mindful of plant medicine in general. One of the things I love about Sacruna, and it's why I linked up with them, is they will do a call beforehand to make sure that it's a fit for you so that you're going to get the most from the experience, but also to cap and minimize any potential downsides. So that's a very important disclaimer to put at the start of this podcast. I have done several episodes in the past around this. My most downloaded episode of 2022 was 391, which was my first ever ayahuasca experience. It was 3 nights with the plant medicine ayahuasca over a 4-night period, and that was very transformative for me at the time. It was in Mallorca. I've since changed and was looking for something different because of the last experience I had. When I went to the similar retreat, there was 40 people at it, and for me that was way too many. There was too many energies in the room, too many things going on, and I actually thought that last retreat, okay, I'm done with ayahuasca. I'm done with plant medicine for the time being. And then in August, Sacruna actually reached out. And the first thing I saw was that it's small capped numbers. They only take 12 people. And that had a massive appeal for me. So I was invited to this retreat to do an honest feedback and report on how I found it. And it was absolutely incredible. And I will run through the format. I will run through the questions that you've asked. I will run through my personal experience, but I will also add a caveat. This isn't my area of expertise. This whole podcast, similar to episode 391, which was my first recap, was very much a experiential feedback episode. Fitness, nutrition, training, they're my areas of expertise that I've worked in over a decade. All my qualifications are in. So this is very much a recap based on my experience. So take everything I'm saying here with, I won't even say a pinch of salt, because plant medicine is extremely powerful, but it's one person's anecdotal experience. And I will run through, as I mentioned, the layout of the retreat, how it was different, and the experience and what I got, because this was very different from before. But those previous episodes will be linked below and in the show notes. That solo episode was actually my friend Orla who guided it, but it was more or less a solo episode for that 391. And when I had Melissa Osirio on the podcast, who sat with ayahuasca more than 100 times, we talked a lot about the psychology, the physiology that goes on in the body around ayahuasca. And then when Aidan O'Brien was on the podcast, also linked in the description below, he was somebody that I met at the retreat, and we had a back and forth on our experience. So those are going to be linked below as well, but this one is going to be specific for the most recent retreat that I wanted to capture, hence why I'm recording it in my car while everything is still very fresh, and I'm able to hopefully answer the questions in the way that will be the most supportive for you. My goal at the end of this podcast, if you decide the plant is for you, or it's not for you. That's what I really want to get away from this podcast, or want you to take away from this podcast, that you'll listen and go, yeah, 100%. That is exactly where I'm at right now in my season of life, stage of life. This is the next step that I need. And Sacruna, an amazing setup, which I'll go through, where the safe space, the trust, the ability to surrender into it because of the setup is such an important thing with ayahuasca in particular. There's a lot of retreats around Ireland, around the UK, with people who are facilitators as opposed to shamans who have spent 50 years working with the plant. And I think that's a very important distinguishment to make, because your set and setting when it comes to psychedelic or plant medicine is extremely important. And if you get a call off the back of this podcast, you can click straight through on Sacruna. You can put in that code I mentioned, it'll be linked below. Or alternatively, you'll listen and go, no, hell no, that is not for me. I thought I had a call, but I don't. My hope and goal, and I'd love you to share it with me on Instagram, Brian_Keen_fitness, what you thought of today's podcast, and if it led you one way or the other, because it's a type of episode I'm going to hopefully record today that will take you off the fence one way or the other. It'll push you into going to the next level, working with something like ayahuasca, or it'll pull you back and go, no, that's actually not for me, now that I've heard a little bit more of a deep dive. So that's my goal, hopefully the outcome off the back of this podcast. So let's jump straight in. I'll start with the layout of this retreat. And the pull for me, as I mentioned, was the smaller numbers. One of the downsides of working with a plant medicine like ayahuasca, for anyone that's unfamiliar with it, is the plant medicine that has psychedelic experiences built in, meaning that you're able to work through some of your traumas, wounds, issues, blocks, programming, conditioning that is basically holding you back as a human on this planet in a 3D form. And my first ever experience with the plant was one of the most transformative experiences of my lifetime. I've recapped and touched on that in a previous episode. It awoken large parts of me, allowed me to work through different traumas and wounds that I had either been blind to or flat out refused to ignore. And going into those ceremonies and removing some of those blocks completely transformed my life with myself when it came to some of my self-worth issues, down to some abuse that I suffered in early life. It completely changed my relationship with my closest loved ones, my father in particular. We've had a tremendous relationship for the last several years, but especially since that first ayahuasca retreat, because it allowed me to see and relive experiences from early life, childhood, teenage years, from a place that gives you enough space to see it in a different perspective. With ayahuasca, it can potentially give you very heavy visuals. And the metaphor I've given on a previous podcast was, it was like watching my life through Netflix. So if you're watching Netflix and you're able to scroll through on different movies, different seasons, click on episodes and watch them, that's what my experience was like the first time I did ayahuasca. I was able to look at all those experiences as a child, as a teenager, and I could relive them and rewatch them in real time, visually, like I was watching something on Netflix. And it was as clear as that for me. And what it does, and I think it's very similar to therapy, is it just removes enough intensity from the memory so that you can view it as an adult. The problem, and again, I'm not an expert in this, but having had several guests who are top psychologists, top psychiatric therapists in their field, one of the reasons, or one of my takeaways from the reason therapy can work so well, is it allows you to go back to those memories, those core wounds that you may have conscious or subconscious awareness around, and it allows you to see them with a toolkit as an adult. When you're a child and something happens, when you're a teenager and something happens, you don't have the tools in your arsenal or the emotional intelligence to potentially deal with what's coming up. What happens with ayahuasca, for me, from my experience, is it allows you to relive and re-see those quote unquote traumatizing experiences or childhood experiences that felt like they were boulders or iron vests that you were carrying around, with a fresh perspective as for me, a 34-year-old man at the time. And it removes some of the intensity, some of the sting, and it allows you to rewrite another story, which again, a lot of therapists will do this. They'll say, go to your difficult core wound, go to your trauma experience. And again, disclaimer warning, there's big T trauma, small T trauma. This can be a horrible experience for some if you're dealing with physical abuse, sexual abuse, etc. from childhood. So just be careful, mindful if this isn't a recommendation. I'm just using first-hand experience. But what it does is it allows you to rewrite the story, look at an alternative director's cut ending of what should have happened in that scenario. That was a big thing for me, particularly when I was dealing with some sexual abuse stuff. It allowed me to look at a director's cut of this is how the experience should have gone. This is what happened. It doesn't change the past, but this is what should have happened in that scenario. And what it allowed me to do was look at the two experiences and go, well, actually, I want to live with the director's cut. That's the memory that I want to imprint. That's the focus when I'm feeling overwhelmed or triggered or activated by things that I want to live in and sit in. And plant medicine, particularly ayahuasca, can do this for you. On this retreat, it was laid out with 3 ayahuasca ceremonies and then a San Pedro ceremonies, which is Wachuma, which is a different plant medicine that you take during the day. So ayahuasca is a nighttime plant, meaning that you do the ceremony at nighttime. The way Sacruna set it up was we landed on Thursday. We got set up in this incredible villa, which there'll be photos and videos on my Instagram if you want to check them out. It is just the most beautiful setup and villa with a pool, outdoor areas, space to move around, which again doesn't sound like it's going to be an awful lot, but on previous retreats it was everybody in one room and you stayed in that room for 3 or 4 days, more or less. And there's some learning in that. There's a different type of experience in that. But with Sacruna, there was a lot more time to breathe, meaning that you could do a retreat on the Thursday night, which was the first ayahuasca, which I'll get into shortly. And then you had Friday to breathe. You were sharing a room either with one person or you were in a room by yourself. And there wasn't pressure to do all the other activities. Sacruna provide yoga, they provide sound healing, they provide different ceremonies like cacao, but they tell you there that you do based on what you feel. And if you need extra time to sleep because you're going tripping and visioning all night on the ayahuasca, take the time to sleep, take the time to journal, do what you need to do. That was very different for me from the previous retreats that I've gone to, where everything's very intense. You have to do all the practices, you have to do everything that's going on, and there's some benefit to that too. But with this retreat, it allows it to breathe so that you can process things in a slightly better way. So we did that retreat, or that first ceremony, on the Thursday night. There was intention setting beforehand. There was then rapé, which is a tobacco snuff medicine that goes into I think it's tipi is how it's pronounced, and they blow the tobacco up your nose. It's very unpleasant the first time you do it. It's actually horrible the first time you do it. But as you become more familiar with rapé or hape as a tobacco, pure tobacco, shamanic tobacco, that's not cigarettes, it's not the bastardized version of what people use with their Vincent and Hedges, and I don't even know if Vincent and Hedges still do cigarettes, but it's totally different in terms of how it grounds your body and just allows you to get into a space of openness for when you take the medicine. And with ayahuasca, which I've covered on previous episodes, it's kind of like a tarry black brown medicine that you drink fasted as much as possible. You'll eat at 4 p.m. and then you'll be taking your ayahuasca at around 9 p.m. in the case of Sacruna. And then after that first cup, you will normally start to feel something. In my experience, it's nearly always just physical first. So I feel stuff moving in my body. You can feel some emotions releasing. And then 2 hours later, you get the option of a second cup. And that's nearly always, historically for me, when I start to get all the visuals. So the Netflix that I spoke about earlier, the reliving of experiences, the questioning of what do I need to see? What am I holding on to? What are the habits that are not supporting me that are happening on automatic? You have all these questions going in, and then you can potentially communicate with the plant, which sounds absolutely insane for anyone who hasn't done this. And if you told me before 2022 that you'd be communicating with a conscious plant who is like a therapist who knows you better than you know yourself, I would have said, you're mad, you're insane, your brain is making this up. But off the back of what was now 11, 12, and 13th ceremony, and again, one of the questions that came in, why do I keep going back to ayahuasca? And I will cover that separately, because the plant calls you when it's time. And something I've been challenged with and thinking about a lot in the last 6 months in particular is not learning things, but remembering things. And I always think ayahuasca particularly is like the remembering plant. It's remembering why you came here, remembering who you are at the core, your authentic self, your true self, whatever label or word you want to put on it. And it shows this separation between who you're supposed to be and then your ego and what you've been conditioned and programmed for through society, through family, through teachers, through experiences in life that have brought you to this point. And you have these unsupportive thought patterns, whether it's your eating tendencies, your porn tendencies, your way you show up in relationships, your job, your addiction tendencies to things that aren't serving, your disconnection and numbing out. What ayahuasca has always done for me historically is show me the gap between the two, the things that Brian Keane, the human, the 3D experience moving through this world is doing that just is fucking stupid and isn't supportive anymore, and then how I should be living. And then you get to decide through the integration period of 3, 4, 5, 6 months after how you want to live your life, and you get to move in that direction. The first night of the Sacruna Retreat was my first version of an ego death that I've had with ayahuasca. In 2022, I did what's called a toad, which is Bufo alvearis. It's a very, very strong and very intense plant medicine that you smoke. And that, at the time, I thought I had completely broken my whole body. I talked about this on the podcast. I got heart palpitations after it. I couldn't get my drive. My gear that would normally be operating in a 4 or a 5 was down to a 2 for several months after, and I just couldn't get going. But the message I got from that after 6 months, after 7 months, was I just have to slow down, that everything that's going on in my mind is going at 100 miles an hour. And there's nothing in nature, nothing in life that operates at 100 miles an hour at all times. No flower blossoms or blooms all year round, and that I have to take steps back so that I can take steps forward. But the terrifying experience of that was I lost all sense of self. The first time it ever happened to me, there was no Brian Keane, there was no Galway, there was no Ireland, there was no Holly, there was no family, there was nothing. It was just complete nothingness for me. The first night in Sacruna, I got a version of that. And when I was in the middle of my trip, one of the facilitators came over to me, and I had no concept of what was going on. I completely forgot who I was. I forgot where I was. I forgot what I was doing. She actually came over to me and saw that I was clearly deep in my trip and was like, Brian, do you want rapé? And I just looked at her and I said, who's Brian? And then I said, what's rapé? And she was like, okay, we'll leave you for now. And then slowly and surely the pieces started to come back together for me. And I was like, okay, I'm Brian Keane, I'm a man, I'm from Ireland, I have a daughter, and all these like things that are you just walk around assuming is normal had to be layered back, as if somebody put all of my memories into a recycle bin on a laptop and I had to retrieve them one by one. And what that gave me the next day when I was thinking about it and integrating it was, okay, I get to decide what habits I follow. I get to decide what conditioning is good for me. I get to decide what programs, to keep the analogy of the computer in the recycle bin, that I hold on to and which ones I get to delete. And that was a very powerful experience, which actually ties very heavily into my last night, which I'll come back to shortly. The next night then, we had at Sacruna, there was yoga in the morning, there was sound healing, there was a sadhu board, which is like a bed of nails that you put for your feet to help ground you. There was lots of different things in between that you were able to do that would help set you up for the experience that night. The second night was so much softer. I felt rocked to my core after the first night. I was tripping until probably 5 a.m. I didn't get sick. I don't get sick on ayahuasca. People will purge in different ways. This is a bit of a misconception on the plant. I've only ever got sick once on ayahuasca and purged once on ayahuasca. For me, it's normally crying, it's normally shakes, trembles, and I will purge in a slightly different way. For some people, they'll dance. For other people, they'll sing. So you can purge in lots of different ways. And that second night, I was toying with actually not doing it because I had been rocked so much the night before. And the shaman, who was from Peru, Saul was his name, was one of the most powerful human beings that I've ever been in contact with. And one of the things that's very important with a retreat like Sacruna compared to alternative ones is you can do a course for 2 months and become a facilitator shaman to make ayahuasca. Or you can work with a shaman who, in the case of Saul, had been doing it for 40 years, whose mother was a shaman, whose grandmother was a shaman, who was being breastfed when his mother was drinking ayahuasca so that he could check in and speak to the plant. And having somebody like that over a retreat is the difference between a deep trip and working through psychological rubbish, garbage, shit that's stuck there versus a shaman who will sing and awaken the plant within you so you can communicate with it. Because there was only 12 people at the retreat, Saul would move around and sing, and he would have, it's called the kiss of the shaman, where his voice would change when he was in, or when we were in a trip and an experience, and he would sing directly to the plant. And what it does, or what it feels like to me, again, I'm not an expert, it feels like it's wakening the plant up within you, and then you're able to communicate with it. You can ask it all its questions, all the stuff that's not supporting you. Why are you living a certain way? Where are the blocks? What do you need to see? And on that second night, I asked the plant, I asked the ayahuasca, which again sounds mad if you've never done it. I was like, please go easy on me tonight. I was like, I can't do a fucking other night like last night. And it was much, much softer. It was a lot more soul based. So again, I'm going to go a lot more hippie woo spiritual here. And I know a lot of you that listen to the podcast when I'm talking nutrition training, I'm always evidence-based and scientific and making sure that I'm able to back up and support what I'm saying and what guests are saying. This is a little bit more experimental and anecdotal, but that experience for me was very much soul-based. It was showing me all the soul contracts that I have with people in my life. My daughter, my mother, my father, my sister, my extended family, people who are very, very close friends, people who I have a very strong soul tie and soul connection with. And it was showing me visually, like the Netflix, all the people on where the contracts were drawn, why I was connected with those people. And then it merged and amalgamated into people who have passed, people who have died, who I had a very strong connection with. And my godmother died this time last year actually. And I was able to, what felt like, communicate with the energy of her alongside my grandmother, my cousin, people who I was very, very close with on a spiritual side. And again, skeptics or non-believers will say it's your brain making it up, and maybe it is. People who are spiritual and connected to a different frequency will say that it's the plant condensing time, because time is a construct that we've created as human beings so that our mind is able to perceive what's going on and we can move through this world in a way that doesn't feel contextually out of bounds. But what happens, and again, whether it's that, the latter or the former, it's the healing that it gives. Similar to the abuse story I gave earlier, it's not that you change the past. You can't go back and fucking change things. But what you can do is create an alternative picture, an alternative movie, to keep the metaphor, that of how things should have been. And as a result of that, it removes some of the intensity. It creates a little bit of extra space between you and the story. And you realize that you're not your story. You're not your programming. You're not your conditioning. And that second night was a lot smoother. The facilitators that were playing the music, Andros and Dennis, two, wow, incredibly talented musicians who would use different instruments to facilitate the trip and allow you to see the visuals, allow you to feel what you need to feel. That second night was a lot softer for me. I was able to connect with the things that were important to me, the loved ones that were here, loved ones who had passed, and just remove all the shit, remove all the blocks, remove all the ego of how I'm supposed to be, what I'm supposed to think, and just kind of be with it in that moment. There's a brilliant book by Ram Dass called Be Here Now, which documents his journey from, I think it's Harvard professor to LSD pioneer, and trying to heal the world through psychedelics so that people could remove themselves from the pain of their ego that it's been created. And it's a book I come back to a lot. That Be Here Now is something I've referenced in Rewire Your Mindset in terms of a mantra. I also referenced it in Rewriting Your Story, that when I find my brain is wandering, podcast, work, family, I just breathe and go, be here now, until I bring myself back into that present moment. And that second night was so much softer. And then thankfully that was Thursday and Friday. Saturday there was a break. So Sacruna run a break with the cacao ceremony at that night time, which is amazing. Cacao, for anyone that has a chocolate lover, you can't go too wrong with a cacao ceremony. But we did a day trip into somewhere in Marbella, somewhere in Spain. I can't even remember where we went to. And there was different caves and different expeditions and a break from the plant medicine for that night, which was badly needed for me. And something that's happened in the past with previous retreats is they're layered on top of each other. So normally with ayahuasca, from my experience, again, different retreats might be different. From my experience, it's always been 3. So Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night. So it's one after the other after the other. That can be really intense. And the only analogy I can give is it's kind of like if you were smashing a workout, like a leg day or an ultra marathon or a CrossFit workout, something really intense, and just doing it back to back to back, it just breaks you down so much. And that quote unquote rest day in between was just a little bit of a reset. It allows you to process, it allowed you to integrate, it allowed you to refuel. The food at Sacruna was the best I've experienced at a retreat. It was the first time ever that there was meat and fish in the dinners, in the lunches, so that you're actually able to refuel. There's certain ayahuasca-based diets that you'll get sent before you sign up to the retreat, you know, minimizing alcohol, minimizing processed foods, eliminating them completely actually right into the lead up in 7 days before, different dairy products, sexual abstinence, lots of different things that you need to do to enhance and amplify your experience at a retreat like this. But for me, it was the food just fed me, for the lack of a better expression, but fed me in the sense that it gave me back more power so that I could have a deeper trip. And something that has been a negative in the past is by the third night, I would be exhausted from not sleeping, starving from not eating, and sometimes I would just fall asleep for part of the ayahuasca because I was so exhausted. Whereas this break in between and the food allowed me to go an awful lot deeper because I felt that power, I felt that energy, I felt myself refueling like a good rest day in between a strong training session. Then the Sunday night, we had the last ayahuasca ceremony, and that was, and still is to this day, the deepest I've ever gone with the plant. And when I spoke about the ego death on night 1, it went into overdrive on the last night. And there's a few questions here about surrendering and worry and fear around plant medicine, which I think will serve better when I answer those questions directly. But to give a brief synopsis of the last night, it was the deepest I'd gone, and I lost all sense of self and disappeared completely from this reality. And I was connected into something else. The Andros, who was the Wachuma master who led the ceremony the next day, gave me a line on one of our integration sessions about radio sapien. He was like, you've got your human frequency, the one you walk around the world in, the one you're listening to this podcast in, the one I'm recording this podcast in. But with the plant medicine, you can change that frequency, like changing a radio station, and it goes up. It ramps it up to 11. It doesn't go to 11, Spinal Tap reference, but you ramp up to 11, and you're connected in with a cosmic consciousness, a universal consciousness. And what's very interesting about this, and I'll speak about the book when I came back, I ended up writing my next business book in a nearly 15-hour flow state because it all just unlocked off the back of ayahuasca. When I lost sense of self on that last night, I came back bit by bit. I remembered my name. I remembered why I was there. And I had my eyes open for this whole thing. Normally I close my eyes for ayahuasca, I put on blindfold, and then I get the visuals like the Netflix I mentioned earlier. For this last night, I had my eyes open the whole time, but everything kind of disintegrated and fragmented in front of me. I kind of lost sense of everything that was there. And then I had to build myself back. And like an architect or like a construction worker, putting a brick on top of a brick, putting beams on top of beams, I was able to bring myself back and go, okay, these are the things that Brian Keane, the person, does that I really like and want to keep. My, passion for life, the way I am as a father, my fitness, my business, the service that I do. And then there's these other things over here that I'm like, I don't fucking want these anymore. I don't like these. This attraction and desire to things that are unserving and unsupportive. The spontaneous cycles of self-worth issues based on things that have happened in the past, where I'll question my self-worth and question the love I should have for myself. I was like, I don't fucking want these anymore. I was like, I'm just going to leave these. I'm going to put these in the recycle bin. I don't want these anymore. And that's what the last night was like. And when I came back, this was a couple of days ago, on the plane, I had been writing and going back and forth with the business book for about 18 months now. I had a really good idea on how I wanted it to lay out, the message I wanted to communicate about scaling your story, the 5-step framework for fitness entrepreneurs to increase their income and impact, which is the title and working title. And as I was coming back on the plane, the whole framework just went poof into my brain. Scale. I was like, okay, scale. So SCALE, scale, storytelling. C, core offer. A, amplify it. L, leverage it. E, evolve in your business. And the whole framework came. And then the next day, when I sat down to write, I went into this heavy flow state. Flow state is Mikhail Csikszentmihalyi's psychological theory where you lose track of time. Musicians get this, athletes get this. And I got this with writing for about 15 hours. And I wrote nearly the whole book. The whole thing just came flowing out of me. I got this realization and, oh my God, that's it. And as if something downloaded from another source, I was able to put all of that and write all of that. That's only ever happened once before. When I wrote Rewire Your Mindset, my second book, that book flowed out of me, where the other ones were, there was more of a process. It was write for a couple of months, take a step back, write for a couple of months, take a step back. And I put a lot of that down to the clearing from the ayahuasca. So that was the final ayahuasca ceremony. Then the last day, the Monday before we went home on the Tuesday, was San Pedro, Wachuma. And I've never experienced this plant before. It was my first time sitting with it. Very similar to ayahuasca in terms of you drink it. San Pedro is a cactus, and it's a psychedelic cactus they use in South America. And what Andros, the facilitator and Wachuma master, said is it's like the plant that transcribes to cutting off your head, which means that you don't think, you feel. And it was the exclamation point that I didn't realize I needed off the back of ayahuasca. Historically, on previous retreats and previous experiences with ayahuasca, it normally takes me a couple of weeks to come back because you're tuned into this very head-based frequency of consciousness that it's very difficult to come back and train. It's very difficult to come back and work. These are things that I used to always have to take several weeks break from, just because it would be 2, 3, 4 weeks before I would find a rhythm of life again. What the Wachuma did is it allowed you to integrate everything right back into your body, but it lasts way longer. So ayahuasca, you take it at 9, you're going to be tripping till 3 a.m., 4 a.m., 5 or 6 a.m. in my case. San Pedro, we took it around 10 a.m. and it was still going around 10 p.m. So it lasts for about 12, 13 hours, but it's much softer. Ayahuasca is called the grandmother plant. It's a little bit harsher. San Pedro, Wachuma is the grandfather plant. So the way Andros explained it, he said it's like your grandfather, it comes up very, very slowly and then moves nice and slowly. And that's how it was. And they broke this ceremony into 4 core components, which was fire, water, air, and earth. So there was different altars set up where we were able to run through physical things. It sounds very, very hippie woo, I know when I say it like this, but what it did is it allows you to connect with your essence as a human being, your fire, the things that you want to burn away, the metaphor around all the shit that's not serving you and just burning it away and not needing it anymore. The water, the sustenance for life, the thing that you need that the gratitude to feel that you get to exist and you get to live, the air that you're able to carry words through the air and you could speak to yourself and others and have that impact, and in the earth, which is ultimately grounding yourself back, that you're a experience, or you're not a human having an experience, you're an experience having a human. And that's such a powerful connection point and reframe. If you're someone like me who struggles with a history of anxiety and depression, which normally comes from a misalignment, you're feeling, in my experience, you're feeling misaligned with what you're doing. Your anxiety, which is your catch-22 of the evolutionary sense of your brain that allows you to tap into your future self and the vision of the future and what life you want to be, runs amok and runs wild, leading to anxiety, constantly thinking about the future. And then depression on the other side, something I've experienced very heavily in my early life, where you're so stuck in the past, you're stuck in the fucking story, and your self-worth and your self-love get just rocked and deteriorated and destroyed, and you're too close, or in my experience, you're too close to it. And what these experiences have taught me, alongside other modalities, therapies, self-work, podcasts, books I've read, is you're not your story. You're not your past story, and your future story hasn't been written yet. I ended 2 of my books, The Fitness Mindset and Rewire Your Mindset, with the Harley Davidson quote that when you're writing your life story, make sure nobody else is holding the pen. And that's what this can feel like. It allows you to take the pen back and rewrite your past so that you're not stuck in the intensity of the negative things that have happened, but it also allows you to write your future because it hasn't been written yet. And that all together, as a summary, was one of the most profound experiences with the group that was there. And there were people in that room, the 12 people, the 12 souls, the 12 humans, the 12 individuals, were just a collective energy that fed me through the entire experience. What I got at the end was the mirroring of some of the positive traits in those individuals that I sometimes forget I have them in myself. You see courage, you see strength, you see gratitude in these other people, and it feeds back to you that I have this too. I need to tap into that frequency more. And again, it's just a beautiful experience. It, again, as I've mentioned, one of the most profound things you can do if you feel a call for it. Sacruna in particular excelled and succeeded, actually over succeeded in terms of expectations. I went out there thinking this will be good. I liked the way they onboarded with the call beforehand. I liked the layout of the retreat. The shaman was very powerful, the facilitators, the food, but they over-delivered heavily on this. It is a premium retreat. It's a little bit more expensive than you pay for the average ayahuasca or plant medicine-based retreat. But I think, and this is kind of hand on heart, I think the space, being able to trust and surrender is all around the set and setting, that you might be better if you were, somebody like me where you're very fortunate with the living that you make and you get the call. Sacruna are going to be a great fit. If you are feeling the call and you're like, the money's slightly out of my range at the minute, maybe put some aside because you're not meant to go right now. But one of the recommendations, and this happened off the back of when I would send people to previous retreats or other retreats, when the experience wasn't good, my whole job, and documenting it on this podcast, is showing you if it's going to be for you. And I try and live in alignment with my work. I don't recommend anything that I wouldn't promote for free. I don't take payment for anything I wouldn't promote for free. That goes from the apps that I use, to retreats I go to products that I use. And this is one that I would look into it. I'll put the link below so you can see it. And if you feel a call, then maybe it might be time to answer that. I've said on a previous podcast, which I'll get into now when I come into the questions, that sometimes when you receive the call and you get the message, put the phone down. But sometimes that phone will ring again and you might have to pick it back up. Now I'll jump into the questions that have been sent in through Instagram. And as I mentioned, please let me know on Instagram whenever you're listening to this podcast, a week it comes out or a year after it comes out. Hit me up on Instagram, DM Brian_Keane_fitness. Let me know what you thought. The first question, would you say it was quite a spiritual experience? Yes, but all of my plant medicine trips with ayahuasca in particular have been very, very spiritual. I historically, before I sat with ayahuasca in 2022, didn't really consider myself that spiritual of an individual. I was very much a everything you see is what there is. And I never, and historically didn't meditate, which I do now every day, but I could never channel into that frequency of peace, love, gratitude, that very high frequency vibe. I was able to tap in and get a lot of other shit done, but that would normally fuel anxiety. The line I've used in a book in Rewire Your Mindset was, it was inner turmoil fueled by outer success. So it looked like I was doing a lot of success on the outside, but it was driven by this anxiety. And what plant medicine has done for me, and the metaphor I've used, is it's like I switched the fuel source. I was running off petrol or diesel or gasoline, and it switched it to electric. I didn't get any less done. If anything, I actually got more done in my life in terms of outward success, but it was being fueled from a better place. It was being fueled from a better energy source. So this was a spiritual experience, but then all the previous ones have been as well. 2, how are you feeling now? Very good. I think the bookend of Wachuma brought me back a lot faster than previous experiences. Normally I clear my schedule for 2 weeks after, because it just takes me a while to come back. Having San Pedro or the Wachuma, I'm using those terms interchangeably, that brought me back a lot faster. So how I'm feeling now, again, coming back, seeing my daughter, seeing my loved ones, getting back into the swing of routine, which with a life that I love, that I get to live, I feel great now, and it's just been further enhanced because of this experience. 3, curious to know why you've done more than one ayahuasca experience. Great question. So when I first went to ayahuasca in 2022, there was a guy who I met, who I won't mention his name in case he listened to the podcast, but he used to go to ayahuasca every single month. And I was speaking to him going, oh, I don't want that to be me. I was like, I have a history of coping mechanisms and crutches, training being one, work being another, drugs and alcohol earlier in life, crutches, coping mechanisms to disconnect. I was very afraid that ayahuasca potentially for me could become another crutch, that I would want to go back every month to get that feeling. And that's not what happened. But what did happen is you get calls, and it's interesting when you have 3 ceremonies at one retreat, it adds up quite quickly. And the first time I went was in 2022. The episode I recorded, the most transformative of my life to that point. And then off the back of a really bad breakup in 2023, I got the call again. That, as I've spoken on previous podcasts, fragmented me and broke me into a million different pieces, not because it was the relationship I was supposed to be in. It wasn't, and not because it was the person I was supposed to be with. That also wasn't the case, but because of what it revealed and brought up within me. When I was on Gavin Meenan's podcast, The Modern Warrior, which I'll actually link in the description below as well, he speaks about breakups, and this can be the same with job losses for some people, but or death of a loved one. It's not the breakup that breaks us, it's what it reveals within us. And for me, I had to work through all the shit I had buried for so long. And what felt, and the story I was living in at the time, was when that love got taken away from me, I was never going to experience it again because I didn't know how to give it to myself. And that's a beautiful message and experience to get. Or even though it was difficult, extremely difficult, arguably the most difficult thing I've done to my life was moving through that and keeping my anchors, my daughter Holly being the big one, on what kind of dad do I want to be, and having to work through and heal my shit that I just flat out refused to look at because I was afraid. Ayahuasca gave me back some of that strength and courage. And so that was 9 ceremonies straight away. So it adds up very, very quickly. I then in 2024 went to work with the shamans who I had worked with on the shaman project. And I did one night of ayahuasca there and very quickly realized that wasn't what I was supposed to be doing. My main takeaway from that was, you're done. You don't need the plant anymore. Life is good. Learn to run downhill, to quote Matthew McConaughey in his books, Green Lights. When life is hard, just learn to run downhill. So that was a break then until August when Sacruna reached out. And this was a different retreat. There was a combination of a soul call to remember some of the things that I was possibly forgetting, but also a bit of a responsibility to give back and educate and illuminate that this is here for some people if they need it. And this was the first time that I went that I didn't get anything massively profound. I got a lot of little things, but I didn't get anything crazily profound. I didn't heal this crazy core wound that had been there for 30 years. I didn't break up with my girlfriend. I didn't quit my job. I didn't stop doing fitness and go meditate on a mountain somewhere. That didn't happen actually at any of them, but especially this one, because life was really good going this time. So my experience was different. And part of the reason was when Sacruna reached out, I haven't, and I still get a lot of messages from people asking about retreats, and I've not sent as many to the previous one because I think it's been split. It's hard to recommend when it's not your exact experience. So I don't think that company's still running in its traditional sense. Maybe it is, but I know people that have gone and then it's been ran differently, etc. So again, not a knock on it. Very, very good facilitators, some of which I know, but I wanted to be able to send people somewhere that as a responsibility, or my responsibility, that they'd be looked after and that everything would run smoothly. And I told Sacruna when I went that if I go and it's shit, I'm not either going to record the content or I'm not going to send anybody here. But it's gone the other way completely, where I couldn't recommend them highly enough. So again, the reason I've gone back, it's been different each time, but it doesn't belong adding up when you're doing 3 each time. Did anything come up for you that you were surprised about? Not so much on this one. Possibly one of the limiting stories that I've had is because I've had a history of self-worth issues, which has manifested itself in a whole host of things that look externally good and successful, physical body, money, etc. They're things that I sought out because of an insecurity originally. And I thought when I would go into this experience, it would show me more of that, some of the stuff that happened in earlier life. And the message I got on the second night was, you're 95 to 99% good. You're living life exactly as you're supposed to live. You're showing up how you're supposed to show up. You love what you do. You've got amazing people around you. Most of the people who were the closest to you are still alive. You need to hold gratitude for that. But stop focusing on the 1 to 5% that's not perfect. And that sounds really obvious, but until it illuminates or comes up within you or you're shown it, you forget. Again, the negativity bias is a hardwired evolutionary trait. It's what's kept our ancestors alive thousands of years ago. If something was rustling in the bushes and it was a tiger and you ran away, or if it was just some wind and you ran away, you saved yourself and passed on your genes. That negativity bias is really strong. What that illumination gave me was, I need to focus on the 95 to 99, which again sounds super obvious, Captain Obvious here, I know, but for me it's not something I do by default, so that did surprise me a little bit. Next question: how do you know this is the next step in order for you to heal further? It wasn't for this experience for me. I didn't go there with I need to heal this, like an onion layer, because you're always evolving and you're always working through stuff to try and be a better human being. Again, I don't want to put words in other people's mouths, but that's the language I use. I didn't have a strong call this time. I wasn't in pain. And with ayahuasca, and I had a horrible experience the second time I went back, when I tried to force the plant to stop me being in love with somebody who I didn't want to be in love with anymore. And that was the worst night of my life. Dark night of the soul. It was fucking horrible. Like, I used the example when I was speaking with, I think it was Aidan O'Brien on the podcast, like somebody severing my arm, and then every time it would sever off, it would grow back again. And that pain was just excruciating. But it was from not surrendering to the medicine and letting it show me what I needed to see. So I've gone to ayahuasca in the past in pain. I've gone this time not in pain when life has been good and the experience is different. So again, I can only speak firsthand experience, but you'll know if you get a call for it and you think, fuck, I've listened to this podcast, this is what I need, it's probably a sign that you should follow up on it. Next one: what insights did you get? Mostly the ones that I've spoken about here. An insight that I didn't expect to get, which I really liked, which will help me in my meditation, was that radio sapien line I got from Andros. That I normally walk around, and I think everybody is the same, we walk around with a normal frequency that we're used to, the way we see the world, etc. Sometimes when I meditate, and I meditate nearly every day, I can struggle to shut my brain down and slow it down so that everything is operating, like your heart beats at a certain level, your digestive system works, all these things in your autonomic nervous system that just go on and happen. And then you've got your brain, which is like running at 1,000,000 miles an hour, whether it's caffeinated or not. And having that framework or reference point of, okay, I need to tune Radio Sapien down. I need to slow down my thinking, and I can use my breath to help slow that down. That's an insight that I will integrate and use for the coming months, possibly coming years. Next question, the great one. Do you have a slight worry that it could have a severe negative impact on your mental health? No, but asterisk. I'm also relatively experienced with it at this point. So I know even on that last night when I lost all sense of self and had that ego death, there's a trust and surrender process that you've gone on a trip or a journey before and you've came back. And the best line I ever got was from Ryan Barnes, who actually now runs mushroom retreats around Ireland. Ryan, during that night of the dark night of the soul, when I was just in agony, everybody around me the next morning were like, what the fuck happened to you last night? I was like, oh, don't start. Like, he gave me advice about trust, surrender, and receive. And that's always my mantra when I'm in and working with the plant medicine. Just trust and surrender to it. It'll show you what you need to see, and then you can receive the message that it's willing to give. To say that everybody shouldn't be worried about the negative impact on mental health would also not be true. If you have underlying mental illness, if you have a serious issue with control, where you will not let go of it, like my experience on that dark night of the soul, where you just were trying to force something to happen that you weren't ready to deal with, that could have a serious negative impact on your mental health. So it's not to say that there's not risks. There 100% is. There's risks with nearly anything we do in life, but particularly something as extreme as plant medicine, where you can go into a psychedelic state. For me, I don't have a worry personally, but that's also the last several years of meditation and knowing that what's meant for me won't pass me, and that most of my blocks, most of my negative programming or stuff that I've created, that I can choose to let go of at any time, but sometimes it needs to come unstuck. And your plant medicines, for me, is the difference between knowing and understanding. Knowing is logically knowing that I don't want to be this way. I don't want to think this way. I don't like that I do this. Understanding is this deep body feeling, somatic practice of, oh, fuck, okay, I don't need that anymore. There's a bridge. And what plant medicine has done for me is it serves as a bridge between the two. Most of the stuff, again, focus group of one here, most of us know the shit we shouldn't be doing. We know we're doing stuff that's not helping us. Too much alcohol, too much processed foods, over-exercising, working too much, getting activated and triggered in relationships and then blowing up at people. We fucking know what we shouldn't be doing, but we still can't break the pattern. And what plant medicine has worked for me, it's like a bridge between the knowing and the understanding. And when you combine those two things together, it normally leads and facilitates change, from my experience anyway. Next question. Having done a retreat, it was life-changing, but no holiday camp. How does this compare? It was better. Yeah, it was better. With Sacruna, if you took away all the plant medicine, the retreat would still be great, to be honest. The beautiful setup, the food, the yoga, the sound healing, the cacao, all the great stuff that was there. What I liked so much about Sacruna was the breathing space in between. The fact you had your own bedroom. Again, I had a guy with me for the first night, but then he had to leave after for reasons I won't share because I haven't been given permission. So I had my own room for most of the retreat. But you're still only sharing with one other person versus 20, 25, 30, 40 in one of my cases where you're in one big massive room sharing with everybody. And that's a big difference between the integration process and just being able to let things breathe. And I, having done both now, and there's merit to both. There's merit to being in a room with 25 people, sleeping in the same room, doing very extreme, constantly doing different activities, fire ceremonies, yoga, animal flow, things I've done in the past that were just like filling the space. But this optional element of do what you need, listen to your body, listen to what you need. That was very that was very different, but in a better way for me. Now, this also could be a season of life thing for me. So again, focus group of one, but I personally don't think I would go back to the alternative now, having this as a reference point. But again, don't quote me on that, because you should always give yourself permission to change your mind. But as of now, I found this much better. Last question. It's been on my mind to go, when do you know if it's the right time? I've always thought of plant medicine, ayahuasca in particular, like a call. There's a great podcast I listen to called Plant of the Gods with an ethnobotanist, Mark Plotkin. One of my favorite books is The Tales of a Shaman, when he lived in the Amazon rainforest with one of the tribes. I can't remember the name of the tribe off the top of my head, but he had a recent podcast with a ayahuasca expert who, on one of her trips, was speaking with the plant, and the plant said, "You really think you decided to come here?" Meaning that everything in your life has set you up for this point, and now you're just answering a call that some other divine frequency, to not get too spiritual or woo, has pulled you towards. And that's why the call can feel like a call. And that's why a podcast like this will hopefully work one way or the other. Because if you listen to this episode or any of the previous episodes and you go, fuck no, I'm out, which was the messages I got off the back of the 391 episode, it was a complete split of people going, I need this, I'm ready. And then other people going, nope, thought I was ready, but I am not fucking ready. Thank you so much for that. I hope this podcast serves in a similar way so that you're not on the fence. It's not to push you to go. That's not my role. That's not anybody's role or responsibility. But what I'm hoping to facilitate here is that it gets you off the fence, one side or the other, whether that's a yes or whether that's a no. That's a lie. I have one more question that I forgot. It was the longer one that got sent in on DM. One of the most intriguing aspects of an outer body experience is the feeling of being completely out of control. This terrifies me. How do you think such an experience can change a person on a fundamental level? And in the aftermath, how can someone lean into that transformation and really embrace the changes that come with it? Very deep question. Great question. The first thing with being out of control, the Brian Keane before the very first retreat was a control freak. 100%. I had serious control tendencies, hence why my anxiety was ramped to 11 at all the time. Again, leads to outward success externally, but you're fueled by this anxiety inside. What the plant medicine taught me was the beauty comes in letting go. The beauty comes in not being in control, because the control is an illusion anyway. It's a construct that you've decided to keep your ego safe and protected so that you can move through the world without feeling too much pain or hurt. When I first understood that was a story and a narrative that I, as a person, Brian Keane, had decided to follow subconsciously as programming, that was the first step towards being able to let go. And when it comes to being out of body, a lot of the surrender comes from knowing that there's frequencies, and most of us intuitively know this. We say it all the time, and things like, oh, not digging his vibe, not digging her vibe, we didn't vibe, frequency was off. We have different language, so we instinctively know this. There's people that we talk to, family members, friends, dates. You meet people on the street and go, fuck no, their vibe is off. It's just not flowing and merging with mine. So we instinctively know this. But what I didn't know was there's frequencies within me. When I'm operating at scarcity and anxiety, I'm vibrating at a lower frequency. When I'm operating from a place of love, peace, and gratitude, 3 big anchors for me, I'm vibrating at a higher frequency, which doesn't change anything externally, but it changes everything internally. It means that you're moving through the world on a different fuel source, i.e. electric versus gasoline, diesel, or petrol. That is one of those things that when you understand, not when you know, when you understand, you draw the bridge between the two. You don't fear the loss of control. And in the aftermath, and the biggest misconception with ayahuasca that I've seen is people think the plant does the work and that the retreat does the work. That's not what happens. what happens is it reveals and illuminates and shows you the stupid shit that you're doing and the stuff that you're doing well. And then it allows you to come back into your normal world with your family members, with your friends, with your job, with your fitness, etc. And you have all this awareness, and then you can decide, well, actually, I don't want to be around this person anymore. I don't want to be doing this anymore. I'm getting one life and eventually it's going to be over. I had one breath when I came into this world and eventually there'll be a last breath and then I'm going to be gone. And it's what you do in between. What the plant does, from all the times I've sat with it, is it reveals that on what you're doing well, where you're aligned and where you're misaligned. And then when you come back, that's when the work starts. The work starts for the 2 months, 3 months, 5 months, 6 months, 12 months, 2 years after. You're integrating it each time. And one of the reasons I've had such a long gap, a year and a half between the calls, was I was integrating. I was integrating things that came up. I was trying to show up in the world in a different place. And that aftermath, that afterglow that eventually fades and you go back to your default setting with all this new information. It's kind of like when you go to a conference. I used to go to a lot of business conferences back in the day, and somebody would say something on stage and you go, oh, fuck, that's how I need to run the business, or that's how I need to do my marketing. That's just the awareness. That still doesn't put it into your business. That still doesn't run the ads. That still doesn't create the content. You still have to go and do that. Plant medicine is very similar to that. It shows you what you need to do potentially, but then you have to go and walk the path. You have to go and live the life. Something that I've seen actually through a lot of people who have experienced this is they think the medicine fixes you. What the medicine does is it's like a therapist, it's like a doctor, it's like somebody who will give you the tools for you to go and fix yourself. That's not something I knew, but it is something that I see so often with people. So just to wrap on that final question, the work starts after. You get the revelations, you'll get the experience, you'll get the knowledge, understanding, you'll get everything you need. Generally, the plant will give you what you need, even if it's not what you want. Same as the universe and cosmic connection to everything that we're, whether it's God or whatever language you want to put in it. Universe is the language I use as someone that's not very religious. You're going to get what you need, but it's up for you to do the work after that. So hopefully that answers the question in regards to the aftermath. So that's a wrap on this podcast. I hope it helped illuminate a decision one way or the other. I feel like this is an episode that if you're not curious, you didn't even listen, so you wouldn't have gotten this far. And if you have, hopefully it pushed you one side or the other. As I mentioned, that code will be linked below. Sacruna, who I highly recommend. I've got that Keen, Keane 2025 for 5% off for anyone that does want to use it. And yeah, again, life-changing, transformative, potentially, if you're in a place to experience it fully, trust and surrender into it, and then integrate it in the aftermath. So yeah, let me know your thoughts. That's everything from me from this week's podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Catch you next week, back to regular scheduled programming next week. But I do hope this episode helped.